Hello, and welcome to this presentation about the layoff process and how it relates to unionized employees at Humber Polytechnic. On March 24th, the Office of the President sent out an email notifying all employees that administrative layoffs had been completed and layoffs for unionized employees would begin, quote, shortly. The administrative layoffs used a corporate process that is abrupt, effective immediately, and frankly traumatic for the individuals involved and the broader Humber community. This presentation is a response that makes it clear faculty layoffs cannot follow this corporate process. It is our hope that, in listening, you will feel more educated about your rights, understand the timelines involved, and feel energized for the fight to come. In order to achieve these goals, we'll quickly go over the layoff process, focusing on the relevant articles of the collective agreement so you have a sense of the steps involved, including timelines that are very clearly spelled out and do not match the vision outlined in the President's email. Along the way, we'll note how our contract faculty may be impacted by this process. One of the grimmer facts about precarious academic employment is that the administration doesn't consider the loss of contract faculty to be a layoff, no matter how long you've been employed by the college. They don't have to lay you off. They just won't offer you your next contract. We do consider contract faculty to be important, so we'll be noting where you may be impacted. We'll finish up with a quick reminder of where we are now in the process and end with concrete actions we can take, both individually and as a group, to push back against any proposed layoffs. Starting with our collective agreement, there are 3 articles that speak directly to layoffs. The first is Article 27, which is about job security. This article lays out the displacement or bumping process. It's very complicated and goes on for something like 6 pages. We won't get too into the weeds about how it all works because we've discovered in working with other colleges that have dealt with layoffs, it really does depend on a variety of factors. But we'll cover the broad strokes of how it works in general. Article 28 is much shorter and somewhat clearer. It covers the tools we have as a union to protect our members from proposed layoffs through a joint committee called the College Employment Stability Committee, or CESC. This article also lays out the information we're supposed to get from the college through CESC to help us to protect our members. Finally, Article 29 is the shortest and easiest to understand of the 3. That one is called Extended Staff Reduction and only applies when a certain threshold of unionized employees are targeted for layoffs. In Humber's case, we reached that threshold at 20 full-time faculty. There are additional rules and timelines that kick in when this threshold is reached. Importantly, the first step of the entire process is to notify our union president, Milos, that layoffs are coming. As of the time of this recording on April 5th, this hasn't happened yet. Once Milos has been notified, the CESC meets. Our CESC is made up of 6 members, and the union reps are Milos, Anne, and Dave. A quick note about the strength of our CESC is in order. When Conestoga was hit with more than 180 layoff notices last year, they reached out for help. All of our CESC members have therefore been through this process supporting Conestoga faculty, and we have learned a lot. We're very well equipped to take this on at Humber. Certain timelines kick in once this process begins. The CESC has 7 days to convene and then an additional 7 days to debate alternatives to layoffs, such as alternative placement of faculty. And all of this happens before faculty are even notified. So the email sent on March 24th stating that individuals would be contacted shortly about layoffs was, to put it mildly, premature. After this debate period, recommendations are sent to the president of the college, who is the decision maker. And this point is important as we think about strategies to push back collectively. Once we get to step 2, if the president decides to proceed with layoffs, then faculty will be notified. An important aspect of this to remember is that there is a mandatory 90-day formal written notification period that cannot be skipped. Salary and benefits, including pensionable service and contributions, continue during this period. And vacation days do not count as part of the notice period. During this period, we discuss alternatives to layoffs, which include displacement or bumping. And we'll work with faculty individually to identify every potential opportunity for reassignment. This is why we ask faculty to think about not only what courses they currently teach, but of all courses and programs they could teach that are offered by the college, based on their competence, skills, and experience. The biggest takeaway here is that, in a unionized environment, receiving a layoff notice is not the end of the road. It's the beginning of the fight. And yes, the union has had success at other colleges in arguing for reassignment of faculty identified in layoff notices, so it's a process that absolutely can work. Displacement or bumping follows very specific and complicated rules. These are based on seniority in the strictest sense, but of course also go by teaching area. A math professor without an English degree cannot displace an English professor, regardless of seniority. If you are named in a layoff notice, we will work with you to help you to understand exactly how these rules apply to your specific case. For the moment, it's important to understand generally how this process works. Firstly, we look for full-time vacancies. This is one reason why we asked people who took the VEEP to identify themselves to the union. We consider every recent retirement and every single person who took the VEEP as a vacancy. This is the best possible alternative to a layoff and the least controversial. If there are no vacancies in the area, we look to full-time faculty with less seniority. Though if the administration does its work well, there shouldn't be too much of this happening. However, sometimes we may find someone with less seniority teaching in a different area of the college and be able to argue that someone with more seniority has the requisite skills, experience, and competency to teach in that area. If there are no possibilities within the same employment category, we move to full-time positions in other classifications. There aren't too many of these at Humber, but for example, there is such a thing as an instructor, which is a different classification than a professor. Priority 4 is where we get to contract faculty. It is possible for full-time faculty on a layoff notice to displace non-full-time faculty. However, this is not automatic. Please remember that seniority rules still apply. A full-time faculty member with only 2 years of full-time seniority will not necessarily be able to displace a partial load faculty member with more than 24 service credits. The rules around this part are very complicated, and again, we will make sure you fully understand the situation in your specific case if you find yourself in this situation. But for now, note that seniority for non-full-time faculty is still relevant in these discussions, and note that there are cases when if we do successfully, quote-unquote, save a full-time faculty complement by displacing non-full-time faculty, they may only be saved for the duration of the non-full-time contract. Again, this is not always the case, so we will work with you to help you to understand the ins and outs if it comes to this. Okay, if we get to the end of the 90-day notice period in which we fight against a layoff without success, the faculty member does have some decisions to make and additional support. Within 120 days, faculty need to decide whether they will take severance, and remember that the most recent Kaplan Award increased our severance quite a bit. So make sure you're looking at the latest version of the collective agreement or the Kaplan Award, both of which are available on our website, www.opsu562.org. You can also choose recall rights. Recall rights state that if a full-time position for which you are qualified comes up in the 24 months after your layoff period, they have to give you the position. This is not an invitation for you to compete for the job. You would just be given the position and return to work with your seniority intact. Now, this is a very personal decision, but if, for example, you were able to find another job during your 90-day notice and didn't need severance to pay your bills, but really wanted to return to teaching if possible, then recall rights might be more important to you than severance. Some of the supports offered to faculty facing layoff include financial support to help transition to a new job. The JESREF, or Joint Employment Stability Reserve Fund, is a fund maintained by the college specifically to help with things like tuition, career counseling, or job search assistance. It's not a ton of money, but there is help there for those with specific requests. In addition, the opportunity to take Humber courses for a nominal tuition fee of $20 is extended to those who have been laid off. Note that this doesn't cover all courses offered by the college. For example, the real estate program is not a post-secondary funded program, so that one wouldn't count. Okay, so we said at the beginning of this presentation that the third article relevant to the layoff process was Article 29. This one is called Extended Staff Reduction, and it is only triggered if the president decides to lay off more than 20 full-time faculty. An important effect of this article is that we get more time and more data to really bring the fight to the college through our CESC before faculty are even notified. We get an additional 30 days and additional information about budgets or enrollment, etc., to debate whether layoffs are even the solution to whatever problem they're trying to solve. We've discussed it as an officer group, and we'll try to notify you whether or not they've triggered Article 29, because we think it's important for everyone to have as much information about this process as possible. We do, however, have to talk a bit about how confidentiality operates in this process as well. We will always be as transparent as possible with our members. However, once CESC gets going, there are firewalls that come into effect. Even the other officers won't know what exactly is discussed at CESC meetings. Please understand that anytime we don't share information with members, it's only to continue being able to serve affected members to the best of our ability. We don't want to take up valuable committee time fighting about process and whether or not we've respected it. And we want to protect all of our members who are on the layoff list. That said, it's important to remember that literally none of this has even happened yet. Despite the email on March 24th saying that unionized layoffs would begin shortly, we still haven't heard anything formal from our president. This means that the absolute earliest any faculty could receive notice would be 2 weeks from Monday, April 6th. And that's only if they send Miloš the notice on Monday. If they do trigger Article 29, that gets pushed up to an additional 30 days. So there is absolutely no way they could give notice and have any layoffs all wrapped up by September. This doesn't mean they have to keep us teaching while on notice, so we may not get a SWIFT for September if our names show up on a layoff list. But they do have to keep us on the books, full pay, all benefits, pensionable service into the fall. And we'll keep fighting into the fall, fighting for every single member they want to lay off. Speaking of the fight, we know many of you may be feeling powerless, alone, and demoralized right now. These are perfectly normal responses to, again, very bad institutional communications. But there is actually a lot we can do. To prepare, faculty can think about what courses and programs they can teach in. Think about whether you are more interested in recall rights or severance. These are things we can do for ourselves. In addition, because the process hasn't even started yet, and Anne-Marie Vaughn is the decider, we are at a stage where the right kind of pressure could absolutely make a difference to how this plays out. We may not avoid all layoffs, but the extent of the cuts is very much up for grabs right now. There are two ways this is playing out across the system. Some colleges are opting for stability wherever possible, understanding that the value of their brand and the value of the credentials they offer rests on a stable work environment. Others are cutting deep and damaging the learning environment for their students and therefore the value of their brand in the process. Make it clear that targeting full-time faculty will negatively impact our brand. Enlist our allies in this fight: students, parents, community members. MPPs also need to hear from us. Cuts to OSAP will further hurt the colleges. Funding must be restored to the system to secure a strong future for our students, businesses, and our society. There are petitions on our website about both of these issues at www.opsu562.org. Post the link in your Blackboard sites, write it on the board in classrooms, and don't be afraid to speak with your students about what's going on. This fight is their fight too. And it may seem like a small thing, but refusing fear, informing yourself about your rights, and standing together with your colleagues is powerful. Stay in touch and know that should you get a layoff notice, you won't face it alone. If you have further questions or want to get in touch with us, email info@opsu562.org or drop by the office at the North Campus in F105. You can also find us at the Lakeshore Campus most Tuesdays from 2 to 12 in J106.